Hey, it's Scott Petrak back with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. I watched all three minicamp practices this week and a celebrity softball game on Saturday and talked to a variety of players and coaches. So there's plenty to discuss. Here to join me once again is Dave Chudowsky, good buddy of mine from the WKYC Morning News. Dave, how are you?
I've had my Petrak Pebbles. I am ready to go. I feel strong. A lot of Browns news here this week. We say that every week, but this week, Scott, definitely great because you had the whole team there, right? I mean, we always talk about drama, and there's always things like, hey, why was Odell not there? Why was this person not there? There's things that sidetrack you. But besides contract talk, basically, it's business, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, it was good for a number of reasons. You're right. Number one, it was the first time this offseason we've seen everybody on the field together, right? The starting offense, for the most part, had stayed away from OTAs, so they were back on the field. That was good to see. And instead of, in the last couple of weeks of OTAs or even rookie minicamp, there was one practice a week. This was 3 days in a row. You start to get in a rhythm. It feels a little bit like training camp. It's not training camp. There's no pads. But it starts to get the feel of football. And you can start to get a sense of guys. Now, again, it's only 3 days. It's way too soon to make any, huge judgments. But you can say, okay, I've watched now Jadeveon Clowney 3 straight days. I've watched, Greg Newsome 3 straight days. And I just feel like you get a better sense of where the team is on June 17th.
So, thing that stood out to me, I'm going to call them the 2 C's, chemistry and culture. That kind of stands out. It sounds like you kind of have both right now.
Yeah, I think Kevin Stefanski did a great job in both those areas, really, a year ago in trying times. And I think he's just trying to build off of that this year. Chemistry, I feel like the offense, and you can throw continuity. You can make it 3 C's. I feel like because the offense is the same, and it's the same coaching staff, it's the same playbook, it's the same top, 14, 15 guys are the same players from a year ago, that you already have that chemistry built in. And not that you can't improve it, and I think Baker and Odell need to grow a little bit together. I think Baker and Austin Hooper need to grow a little bit together. But there's a lot to build on with the chemistry. I think on defense, it needs to be built more. The on-field communication needs to get better just because there's so many new faces, and we've talked about this. They have 9 new starters on defense, but they've started to build that, and that started when the guys trickled in to OTAs. And then the culture, it's interesting you said that because, I didn't think Baker, when we talked to him, all the days run together, but we talked to him Wednesday. I didn't think he gave us a whole lot, from a media perspective. But I thought he was strong when he talked about how he has helped the culture change since he got here, and that it wasn't easy to do. And it was particularly not easy to do those first 2 years. And, I'm reading into this, but I feel like he was talking about the coaches, right? You had Hugh Jackson for part of 1 year. You had Freddie Kitchens for that second year. And they just aren't up to the same level of Kevin Stefanski. And I think we all saw it with the record last year and just the way the organization operated. It feels better culturally, and they talk tough, smart, and accountable. And it just feels like there's been a major improvement there. And I don't think you go 11-5 and win a playoff game without a major improvement. And Baker feels like he's a big part of it, and I can't argue with it. I mean, he inherited an 0-16 team, and in 3 years took him to the playoffs. And I do think that says a lot about him and a lot about where this team is heading into what should be a really exciting 2021 season.
Yeah, I like how you upped me there. You took the 2 C's and made it 3 C's. Yeah, all right. I'll take that. I'll take the 3 C's. But I think what's incredible about Baker is that he actually kind of predicted this when he said, hey, draft me and I'll come and change your culture. It's amazing for someone. And again, things could change. We know that. But right now it appears that he has changed the culture. And that's pretty impressive for a guy to kind of call his shot, considering no one else could do it in all these years.
Yeah, I think when, and who knows how Baker's career plays out, right? Are there Super Bowls in his future? Are there MVPs, Pro Bowls? We don't know. But if it plays out like that and he's part of really a transcendent Browns period, I think almost the first sentence of the recap is flashing back to that day in Indianapolis at the Combine. And I stood a few feet away from him in a crowded mob of media and listened to him say that he was the right guy to change the Browns. And it took guts to say it. It took cockiness, brashness, all of it to say it. But it also took a lot of belief that he has in himself. And we've seen that on display time and again. I know that his self-confidence took a hit in 2019, and he's admitted as much. But I think that carried him through the bad year, and I think we saw it last year, and he built on it, and we saw the results on the field. And one of the things Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, said today, we're recording this Thursday, is he sees that confidence in Baker that he gained over the final 6-7 regular season games and then the 2 playoff games. He sees the confidence because he played better, and he thinks he's carried that over to this year. And it'll be really interesting to see what Baker does for a full season in year 2 of the system, year 2 of the coaching staff, with all his guys, and with this not newfound belief, but this added belief and confidence, given that he proved that he could play at a really high level in really key moments in the second half of last season.
So let's continue to talk about Baker. 2 things I want to hit that I want to know from you. Number 2 will be the contract. Yeah. Number 1, what'd you think how he looked on the field these past 3 days? I mean, how you said last week that was probably the number 1 storyline, him and Odell. So we'll start with the number 1 storyline. How do you look?
Yeah, he looked good. He looks in shape, which is one of the things that Van Pelt mentioned as well. Baker, he put on some weight for 2019. And I keep going back to that because there is such a big change, right, from 2019 to where the Browns were last year and then expectedly this year. He put on added weight. He wasn't the same. He didn't have the same quickness, mobility. And then we saw him change that a year ago. And it showed up on the field. He was faster. He made plays with his legs. You flash back to the winning play in that regular season finale against Pittsburgh. They clinched the playoff spot, and he's able to turn the corner and pick up that first down. And he looks to be in as good a shape this year after, devoting so much time and energy into changing his body. And then, Baker throws it good. He just does. He usually throws it well. I mean, there's, occasionally some accuracy issues, but it comes out of his hand nice. Van Pelt mentioned how he's getting to beyond his first and second reads, which is another step in year 2 of the system. I have to be honest, I watched practice for 3 days. Only one of them were the 7-on-7s on the field closest to us, and we're still under COVID protocols. So a lot of it was on the far field. So, you're kind of trying to see through guys and looking through binoculars. But I tell you this, he ended the minicamp today with a touchdown to David Njoku in the back of the end zone, and Njoku went up and made a really nice catch. And then he hit Donovan Peoples-Jones for a touchdown. So I think that's a good way to end the offseason for him and the offense. So, I think there's reason to be excited and expect that Baker will take another step forward in this year.
Did I see he got picked off by the Browns pick, the first-round pick?
He did. It was a big celebration, and it was one of those plays where he had nowhere to throw. And it felt like he held the ball forever. And like I said, we're far away. So I'm wondering, is the play dead? Is it not dead? And all of a sudden you see him throw the ball, and Newsome cuts in front of the receiver, and the defense went bananas. They were all jumping up and down and celebrating with Newsome. So, I talked about those 2 touchdowns, but the interception preceded those 2 touchdowns. And probably in a game situation, Baker throws the ball away. But in this situation, he tried to fit it in and make a play, and Newsome made him pay for it.
So let's talk about the contract situation now. And I don't know, Scott, is this just something that's going to continually be asked?
Yeah.
until it finally happens, I guess. I mean, because what makes it a big deal this week other than the fact that you guys got to talk to him?
Nothing. But that's the thing. We haven't talked to him. I think we talked to him in April. So we're 2 months into this. 2 months later, you get an update from all the players, right? We hadn't talked to Denzel Ward or Nick Chubb since, I think, the end of last season. So you want to get an update. So that's what gave it any newsiness to this week. And then we're not going to talk to him again until training camp, probably. And yes, I do think we're going to talk about it until it's done or until he or the Browns say it's not going to happen for this season, right? Like, say we get to week 1, I could see Baker or even Andrew Berry saying, talks are on hold. We don't want it to be a distraction. It's fine. We're in good spot. We'll pick it up, after the season. I could see that. But until that happens or until the deal's done, it's going to be a topic of conversation. Now, we're not going to ask Baker about it every day in training camp, but it will be an occasional topic. And, we've talked about this before, Chud, but I'm kind of torn. Like, a lot of me feels like a deal gets done, and it probably gets done in, late July, mid-August, before we get to week 1, a deal gets done. Because I feel like the Browns want it to happen. I feel like Baker's open to an extension, but there are some moving pieces here that make me question whether or not it will happen this year. And a couple of those are, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, their contracts, and they're also up for extension, same draft class as Baker. Do the Browns and Baker want to wait and see what those parameters are? Do the Browns try to get ahead of those? And Baker says, hey, or when I say Baker, I mean Baker's agents, say, hey, let's hold off. We don't want to come in too low. Let's see what the market is. And, I think Baker has some leverage there. And it's like any sports contract, right? Do you take the guaranteed money right now? Do you say, hey, the money's going to be better a year from now, which it likely will be, but only if Baker stays healthy and plays at a really high level. And he said Wednesday, he's a guy that's always been willing to bet on himself. So I could see the Browns offering, and I'm throwing out ballpark numbers. Let's say the Browns offered $35 million a year. And Baker says, you know what? If I play great this year and we go deep into the playoffs, I think I can make $45 million a year. And we're talking over 4 or 5 years, then maybe he waits, or maybe he counters and the Browns say, okay, well, we'll give you a 39 or 41. And then they come to terms on that, So I think there's a lot of moving pieces. And right now I'm almost at 50-50 whether it gets done before the season or whether they wait. I would still say gets done before week 1, but I don't feel super strong about that.
So last thing on that, we don't have to talk a lot about it because we have before. Who do you kind of side with on this? Do you think that, and I don't even know if I want to say side necessarily, but do you think that, I almost think the Browns are kind of being smart about this, except for the fact, because it's not like they're going to lose the guy.
Right. I mean, he signed through 2022, right? Because they picked up his 5th-year option. You have the franchise tags you can place on him. I think there's two, like the Browns. I mean, Baker has not had one great full season. Now, I expect him to have that this year, and I expect him to be the franchise quarterback moving forward. And I believe the Browns, owner Jimmy Haslam, GM Andrew Berry, Chief Strategy Officer Paul DePodesta, Coach Kevin Stefanski, all feel like the same way, in that he's the guy. And my thought is, once you feel that way, you're better off locking the guy up. Maybe it saves you money. Either way, it gives you security. It gives you salary cap. You know what the salary cap's going to look like, right? There's some certainty to your salary cap situation. And there's other guys you want to talk extensions with. So I think it makes sense for the Browns to get it done as soon as possible if you're really confident that Baker's a guy. And I think they are confident. So that's why if I were Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta, I would try to get it done because I like the certainty that it brings.
Great points. Okay. Odell Beckham Jr., That's the other storyline.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue the top storyline, right? Seeing him
Yeah.
out on the field.
Yeah, I think I flipped, Judd, because I'm going to kind of do a takeaways. I'm hoping to do a takeaway story over the weekend. And my number one takeaway is Odell looking like Odell. And it's not just because he's Odell and he has such a big name. It's because it's remarkable it's 7 months after ACL surgery, and he looks phenomenal. And that doesn't mean he's going to be great this year. It doesn't mean that he's going to stay healthy all year. What it means is he's a physical freak who put incredible time and effort and energy into being back as soon as possible. And it was evident on the field this week because he looked fantastic.
There seemed to be a plan with him, right? Day one, he just took part in like individual drills, and then he did some teamwork. Was that kind of a surprise on Wednesday? And then today, did he sit out? Can you kind of go through how that went?
Yeah. Tuesday, it was individual drills and some stuff on air. Wednesday was a little more like he lined up in some of the 11 on 11, but it was not full speed. And then today was a planned day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And, we might see the same kind of thing at the start of training camp. I don't think there's a rush to get Odell out there every snap of every practice. Even if he's not coming off surgery, I don't know if there is, right? You got 17 games. You're hoping to play 3 or 4 in the playoffs. Like, I think the Browns organizationally have transitioned into a period where you have to think long-term and you have to think big picture. And it's not about, they don't need to see how Odell looks. It's all about Odell being ready to go week 1 and maybe just as important, being ready week 17 and week 18 or week 19, whatever the playoffs are. I think it went according to their script. I think he looked good. Obviously, we didn't talk to Odell this week, which was, kind of a disappointment. We haven't talked to him since the injury. So whenever he talks, hopefully at the start of training camp, a lot to ask him. I'll be really interested to hear from him. But, I think everybody who said good things about Odell and how he looked were right on.
Interesting. They didn't make him available?
Yeah, my guess is he didn't want to talk. I don't think it was a Browns decision to not make him available. Yeah,
it was Odell. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else on Odell you want to talk about that you saw that maybe stood out to you? I mean, I think you hit it pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was, because he's not doing team stuff, there wasn't one play where you go, oh my God.
Yeah.
The Browns photographer captured a picture of him looking like Odell in air with the one-handed catch, he just looks good. Here's what else from the week of Odell is he can't hit a softball. Watch him at that celebrity softball game, and he looks natural, but he either swung and missed or he fouled the ball back, like
hilarious
over and over and over again. And I'm, if you gave him, probably 60 pitches and maybe one pointer, he would probably be phenomenal. But he just wasn't, and it sticks out to me because, he's such a phenomenal athlete that for whatever reason, at that moment that I was watching, it just didn't translate.
Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield's going yard, right?
He looked great. He played high school baseball. Left-handed swinger, played third base in the game, made a bad throw and got mad at himself. But his swing is legit, and he had some pop. He had a bunch of homers. Yeah, I was impressed by Baker.
So back to the wide receivers then. You asked Baker about the wide receivers I saw when Baker was available to the media. And that kind of stood out to me because that's obviously going to be a huge storyline with the Browns with the offensive weapons in general. You could have the tight ends in there as well. But just that wide receiver room with the fact that Odell missed last year so much of it. And let's be honest, Jarvis wasn't healthy the entire year either.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the coaches use those guys. And, I expect Odell and Jarvis to be on the field, is it 80% of the time? And actually, I thought even when those guys were healthy at the beginning of the year, and you're right, Jarvis, they were both coming off surgeries from the previous offseason, they played a little less than they had the year before, right? They were on the field almost 100% of the snaps in 19. And last year, the coaches used them less, which I think was smart. They had other bodies. You know, when you go 3 tight ends and 1 receiver, you can give those guys a breather and go with maybe a bigger blocking receiver that makes it look like it's going to be a run play, whether that's Darrell Hodge or Donovan Peoples-Jones. But when you talk about that room, Dave, the couple of things that jump out at me is Alex Van Pelt, again, doubled down on the fact that all the people that thought that the Browns were better off without Odell are wrong. And obviously he's a coordinator and he's going to say that. But I agree with him. So that's why I'm, kind of promoting what he said, because I think he's right. I think the Browns are a much better offense with Odell. I think that the things that he can do for you, the deep balls, the end arounds, his breakaway speed, those change how a defense approaches an offense. And I think we saw it most predominantly in that Kansas City game. And Van Pelt referenced it. It said there were times where we struggled without Odell because defenses didn't have to double our best player, right? Or our best receiver. And when they do double Odell and slide coverage and all those kinds of things, it frees up the rest of the field for other guys. And the Browns were missing that when they didn't have him. And I think Baker's improvement when Odell got hurt was almost separate. And I get the fact that there's sometimes when he forced the ball to Odell. I'm not going to say that never happened. But I think the fact that Baker got so much better in the second half of the season was because he got better. He got more comfortable in the offense. Stefanski got more comfortable with what he does well. And it would have happened with or without Odell. So when you bring back Odell into the fold, it's only going to make your offense better. I think Odell sees a confident, mature Baker and says, all right, I trust him. Maybe I don't, maybe he doesn't bark for the ball as much, right? Maybe he says, I can fit in. I trust Baker to get me the ball. So I think that's a positive. And then I'm really curious to see what shakes out at the third receiver spot, because Rashard Higgins didn't practice the last 2 days, and Stefanski said he'd be fine. It's just a minor injury. That meant a lot of time for Darrell Hodge, a lot of time for Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Baker raved about Peoples-Jones. Says he looks fantastic, and he worked out together with him in Austin last week. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how those 3 guys are used. You could throw Anthony Schwartz, the rookie speedster, into the mix. Do they stick with one guy? Do they rotate those guys? Who's inactive? Who's not inactive? It's going to be fun to watch how that plays out.
I'm really excited about all the weapons they have, no doubt about it. I'm also excited to debate you on the Odell situation because I'm still not sure. You and I agree on most everything. I'm 50-50 on that one because you sold me on what you said, but the guy's still a diva. He still gets hurt all the time, and he needs to prove it to me. I mean, I need to see it, Scott. I need to see it.
I get that, and I can't argue those specific points. The diva thing, I think Odell's been he impressed me with how he handled himself in 2019. I thought he's a better guy in the locker room than people would give him credit for. Now, he does need to stay healthy. I don't blame him for that, but he does need to stay healthy. He needs to prove that he can fit in to the offense. I just think he's so special, and I just want to see him healthy for a year, and I think that's what the Browns want. They just want to see what this guy can do. They traded a bunch of assets. I know it was a previous regime, but they traded a bunch of assets for this player, a top 5, 10, 15, whatever he is, receiver in the league. They just want to see him healthy, and if he can live up to that, and if he does, what that means, right? How does that translate to the whole offense? And I just, I'm still kind of captivated by the whole scenario.
I'm going to go full disclosure here too, and just be honest with everyone. The guy's burned me so much in fantasy that it's probably not a fair take on my end. So listen to Scott Petrak on this one, not me.
There you go.
But no, I really listen. You can't argue the talent, and if it all goes well, boy, it's really going to go well. So there's no doubt about that. But we'll talk more about that as the weeks go on. So love what you had to say about the wide receivers. I loved hearing that. How about Chubb and the contract? Because that was a big talking point early in the week.
Yeah, it was. My 2 takeaways from that are number one, when he said, I think the quote was something like, I don't like uncertainty. And I know what I have with this team. I know what I have with these players. To me, that was a signal that he really wants to stay. And he's not trying to leverage his position. He's not trying to, put the Browns over a barrel. I think he's speaking honestly. And that's how he feels. And I don't know if that'll save the Browns any money, but I think it has the potential to do that. I think it certainly shows his willingness to re-sign. And he said, Cleveland's where I want to be. And I think as a fan, I think any fan would love to hear that. And I know most players say that, right? But this felt genuine. I don't think Nick Chubb's a guy to blow smoke. So that was one takeaway. And then, we talked about Baker. And I always thought Baker would be the first of these guys up for extensions to sign one, because I think it helps give you the salary cap certainty, like I mentioned. But now maybe it's Nick Chubb. Maybe because there is no fifth-year option, because he becomes a free agent next March. Maybe the Browns have a sense of urgency. Maybe Nick has a sense of urgency, and they wind up getting a deal done first of the Baker, Ward, Teller group. Maybe Chubb gets it done first, and they can structure it a way that pays him like he should be paid, but it's not a super long-term contract because of the running back. So I wouldn't be stunned if we saw that happen, maybe right on the eve of training camp, a deal gets done with Nick Chubb.
And, it seems in the NFL, the thing not to do is give running backs big contracts, right?
Well, there's peaks and valleys to that, Chud. And, it's nobody gets drafted in the first round anymore, right? Maybe one guy a year. And Nick Chubb wasn't a first-round pick. So we've seen the positional value definitely decrease. But in the last 2 years, we've seen McCaffrey of Carolina sign a deal that pays him at more than $16 million a year, I believe. Derrick Henry is up there. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook are all, I want to say, $12.5 million or higher, and all signed extensions within the last 2 years. Now, some of those guys are a little different, right? McCaffrey catches a ton of balls. Kamara catches a ton of balls. But that's the kind of numbers you're talking about. Nick Chubb, I think he comes in around $14 million a year. So I guess my point is the elite backs get paid, and then I think there's a huge drop-off. But in my mind, Nick Chubb is an elite back. And if you're talking just pure runner, I don't think there's a guy I would take in the league ahead of him. I know you can make the Derrick Henry argument. I would take Nick Chubb. He doesn't catch it as well as some of the other guys do. That's something he's working on. It's something he hasn't needed to do, especially with Kareem Hunt around. But pure running back, he'd be my number one. And he's such a team guy and the model worker that I think Andrew Barry and all the analytics guys say, hey, he does not fit. And maybe their analytics say we don't pay running backs X number of dollars, or we don't pay running backs second contracts. I think they make the exception for Nick Chubb because he's the guy that they want. And I think it would set a terrible example if he does everything you ask him to do and then you don't pay the guy. And he's been super productive. So that's why I think he gets paid.
Agree, 100%. Let's move to the defense now. Top story of the past 3 days, would it be Jadeveon Clowney?
Yeah, I think so. If you're going one person, it's Clowney. If you're going, bigger picture, it's the D-line. Spent a lot of time watching the D-line, and it was fun. So they had some cool drills that they did. There was some competition going on, guys trying to chase down other guys. It was really spirited. It was fun. And I think if fans get to go to training camp, whoever gets to go to training camp will really enjoy watching that, because it's a talented, deep group where you have, 5 or 6 guys at end. You might have 8 guys at D tackle, and they're all yucking it up, and they're all kind of cheering each other on and ragging each other. And Clowney was right in the middle of all of that. And he looked good, right? He's coming off knee surgery on a torn meniscus in December. He looked good. He looked quick. He looked healthy. He looked lean. And he looked like he was having a lot of fun. And when we talked to him, that came through. I mean, he talked about loving football and always liking to have fun. And nothing that I saw on the field in 3 days made me think any differently. And, you just don't have a good feel for a guy when he spends time, he's in the league, but I don't know him. I didn't spend any time with Jadeveon Clowney. And he struck me as a guy, and it's, small sample size, but a guy that's really going to fit in and help that D-line group. And then if he stays healthy, and I know we talk about Odell, it's a big if, but if he stays healthy, the compliment that he is to Myles Garrett and the athleticism he brings and the versatility of being able to move inside, I think he could really open things up for that pass rush.
Let's move to the secondary, Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Greedy spent a lot of time with the ones. He was out there. He was in the team drills. It looked like a full participant. Now they're not hitting, right? And his shoulder injury is, came from hitting, so that'll be a hurdle he has to clear in training camp. But he was out there and he was running with the starters consistently, which, part of that could be Greg Newsome's a rookie, and, coaches don't like to hand starting jobs to rookies if they can avoid it. The other part of it is I think they like Greedy. I think they like how he looks. And they tried Greg Newsome in the slot. And I didn't expect that. It felt like that was Troy Hill's job. And not that it won't be, but Joe Woods said it today when we talked to the coordinator, that, yeah, they're going to try Newsome there and see how he comes back in training camp. And if he can handle inside and outside, they're going to let him do it. And that frees up a chance for it to be Ward, Williams, and Newsome on the field together in the nickel package. It gives you flexibility because Denzel and Greedy don't really play inside. So if your first-round draft pick can play inside, which is a crucial position in today's NFL, it gives you a lot more flexibility. So I thought those were two things that jumped out at me as far as, it's really preliminary, but the kind of early depth chart and where guys were fitting in.
I think when it comes to Greedy and Newsome, this is just all gives us something to talk about and something to do in the offseason. I think they're both going to be on the field a lot.
Well, it's interesting, Chud. I mean, I get what you're saying, and you're probably right given that guys get hurt, right? And if somebody gets hurt, then all of a sudden they're both playing and Troy Hill will be playing. But if you say, okay, week one, everybody's healthy, I think it's interesting to see who those top two guys and who those top three guys are. And obviously last year proved, if anybody had any doubts, that you need depth at corner because the Browns didn't have enough, and it showed up, and it made Joe Woods not run the defenses he wanted. It made him not blitz because he was worried about having enough coverage on the back end. So, yeah, you need plenty of guys, and I'm sure Andrew Berry is delighted that he's got, as long as Greedy's healthy, he's got four guys that he really trusts, and that's before a guy like MJ Stewart, who is a fifth guy. You like him as a fifth guy. You don't love him as a third guy. So I think they like that, but I am intrigued by what could be a battle and what could be Newsome sliding inside.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And you're right on. I guess my point is that once the season gets rolling, it's almost like a pitching staff. You make a big deal about who the number one starter is, but once you're in week 4 or 5, I mean, they all take their turn.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I like that analogy.
Yeah. So, anything else on the defense? How about the linebackers?
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is you still saw a lot of Mac Wilson getting a lot of keys, not the right word, but a lot of reps with, the ones. And he's a guy that kind of seems like he's on the roster bubble to me. Saw a lot of Anthony Walker, who changed his number from 54 to just number 4 today. You saw Owusu Koromoa working in. He made a real nice breakup at the end of practice on Wednesday, showed the quickness. There's a ball over the middle, and I think he probably thought he should have picked it off, but I thought it was a heck of a breakup just to get there and get his hands on the ball. You saw Jacob Phillips working in. You saw some Taki working in. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of bodies at that position. And again, that'll sort itself out, but who's the one? If you only have one, who's it going to be? Who are the 2 in nickel? Who are the 3 in base? And how does Joe Woods use those guys? It'll be interesting to see because right now, I think outside of Anthony Walker, who I think is going to play a ton, I think it's kind of wide open.
Let's go to special teams real quick. You were able to get some special teams talk today, correct?
Yeah, a little Mike Prefer.
Well, yeah, Mike Prefer. And I thought stood out to me was Felton and also the kicking game a little bit.
Yeah, I'll start with Felton. First of all, he's been getting some rave reviews from everybody. It is not just in the return game. Is a running back / receiver. Spent a lot of time at receiver, which is interesting because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of open reps out there. But he spent a lot of time working at receiver. Looks good. Has made plays. Has shown up kind of repeatedly. And then Prefer said he thinks he can be a punt and kickoff returner. And there's not a lot of guys that have that dual threat. And he thinks he can be that kind of guy because he's got elite quickness and then really good speed. Yeah, I think he said great quickness, good speed. So he's not a burner like an Anthony Schwartz, but he's quick. And you like that, especially in the punt return game. So, yeah, and Prefer said the return game is wide open. You got JoJo Natson coming back. You have Felton. You have Schwartz, who's been hurt with a hamstring. So he hasn't been out there, but he has that unbelievable speed that you'd love to take advantage of, at least in kickoffs. You return Donovan Peoples-Jones and Dearness Johnson, but, I think they've shown that they don't really have that burst that you're looking for. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But Prefer was open, and he said, we need to improve immensely in the return game. So, I think that's pretty straightforward. And then the other special teams note is that Cody Parkey, there's competition in camp. They signed Chase McLaughlin, who's kicked in the league, and those two guys are here. He said Parkey needed to get stronger, his leg gets stronger, because last year he didn't spend a lot of time in the weight room because of COVID, and he had a pregnant wife, and he was concerned about that. So his mission this offseason was to get that leg stronger, and he thinks he has, and it shows up in how the ball's coming off his foot. So, obviously field goal kickers are important. We'll probably have a little bit of a training camp battle there between Parkey and McLaughlin. I think Parkey's probably got the edge, but they're looking for a bigger leg on field goals and kickoff.
Isn't it amazing how through all the bad years, and there were a lot of them, we had one of the best kickers in football, and now we have this amazing team, and at least we think it's amazing, right? And we got to question the kicker. Right.
He was fine last year. I thought.
I know.
Yeah, I thought he had a dip and then kind of recovered himself. But yeah, it is. And when I said Anthony Walker switching to number 4, my mind goes immediately to Phil Dawson, right? And yeah, it would be great if you had a guy like Phil, and Adam Vinatieri retired, this offseason. A guy like that just makes it so much easier on a coach from a psyche standpoint, right? You're not worried about your kicker, and a lot of coaches spend a lot of time worrying about their kicker.
All right, I just want to throw a couple news and notes things out. I don't think we need to really discuss too much about it, at least in my opinion. But if anyone's been listening to this every week, we've really hammered home the J.C. Treader situation. Just quickly wrap that up. He said there was no pressure on teammates not to attend OTAs. He said he's not mad at anyone who showed up. No hard feelings either way. Guys who attended or didn't, you feel pretty good about where all that is at. I just wanted to put the closing the door on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. No, I take JC at his word there. That's the vibe I've gotten, that there aren't any hard feelings, that everybody had their own choice in the matter. And he is taking he counts it as a win that he said over 2/3 of the teams in the league modified their offseason program. And it meant less intense practices, less contact, fewer practices. And he feels that's a win, and he feels like the union has given the players the choice again whether or not to participate. And he had felt like it had been taken away because coaches and teams kind of demanded guys showed up, and they didn't feel they had an option. Now he feels moving forward, players will have the option.
Sheldon Richardson going to the Vikings, right? So
and Chud, we had talked about that, right? That I just didn't think he'd come back.
You called it.
Yeah, and it was interesting. He said in his Minnesota Zoom conference that Minnesota offered him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Hey, I want to hear from the Browns," and they just didn't give him the deal he wanted. And we knew it was going to come down to money, and we knew if they had already decided not to pay him $11 million, that they probably weren't going to pay him the number he wanted, and that's what it turned out to be, right? And it's tough to go back when somebody made you take a huge pay cut, and he has a comfort level in Minnesota. And obviously it's a loss because he's a really good player, and he's probably the best defensive tackle that the Browns would have on the roster. But they've added a lot of guys where it feels like they can mix and match and get by without him.
Callie Bronson wasn't there this week, right?
Yeah, still suspended. Stefanski said she'll be back by training camp. Didn't get any more specific than that. It's got to be hard for her, right? Coaches live for this. They live for the field. She has such a big role in the organization. Not only is, she helps coach the running backs, but she's, the right-hand person for Kevin Stefanski. So I think there's probably had to be a really big adjustment from Stefanski's standpoint and just within the organization, just running the day-to-day.
Scott, anything else you want to say about the past 3 days that you saw with your own eyeballs that we haven't discussed?
No, I think we hit just about everything. I think we'll probably slow down the pod at some point over this 6-week break before training camp. I'd like to do a few more. We'll obviously do some right in the lead in the training camp to ramp up for it. But I think there'll be still stuff to talk about, at least next week about, kind of not the fallout of minicamp, but, what lingers from minicamp, where we move forward coming off of this, what do we have to watch out maybe for the next month before training camp happens. But I think we hit on a lot of the key things. And, again, it was just good to see everybody on the field, right? And a lot of big names. And that's what this team, believe it or not, right? That's what this team is about. It's about guys like OBJ and Jadeveon Clowney. And we didn't even talk about Myles Garrett, right? Like, there's so many big names and so much to talk about. And we got to see it all on one or two fields in Berea for 3 days this week.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, we didn't even talk Myles Garrett, did we?
No, we'll have plenty of time. Maybe we'll hit him next week. But, we'll talk, maybe we'll talk about D-line because I thought there was a lot to digest from the D-line, how good they can be, setting expectations, how they're going to use guys. So that's something from a story perspective I'm going to try to get to over the next couple of days, and maybe you can hit that next week, Chuck.
Sounds good. So now we have a big break before training camp, and then it's on to training camp. And then, then it's really going to be go time.
Oh, my gosh. That'll be full speed ahead, Chud. Full speed ahead. So, hopefully we'll be able to talk again next week. Like I said, we'll slow it down a little bit, but there'll still be plenty of stuff to talk about. So we'll have these pods, and I'd like to do at least one next week before maybe taking a week at some point or a week or two at some point off, give Chud a chance to enjoy his summer a little bit. But I appreciate you joining me again, Chud. It's a long one. We had a lot to talk about, and I enjoyed it.
It was fun. I appreciate you having me. Always a pleasure. And watch Channel 3 Go.
Yes.
Weekday mornings, 4:30 to 7.
Before your tea time, before you go to that early tea time, get up and watch Chud, find out what the weather's going to be like. It's perfect TV. I talked to somebody at the bar last night talking about how they, are still working from home and they get up and watch the Channel 3 morning news, Chud. So.
That's great to hear.
Yep. So perfect. So we'll do this again next week, and this is Scott Petrak signing off for the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Thanks for listening.